Good morning. This is World History 2, our SOL and final review. This will cover every single thing we've talked about this semester from the Renaissance through the modern day. This will be a longer video, but if you watch this and the videos from Mr. Long that I linked to Classroom yesterday, it should help you prepare for the SOL as well as the final exam. The PowerPoint I'm going off of, I have uploaded to Classroom, so you have access to that if you want to follow along through that as I'm going through it. I would suggest that you guys do the same. Nothing you have to fill out, just follow along. So, plus if you guys follow along, I don't have to zoom in, zoom out up here as we walk through it. Yeah, because that's not going to work. Okay, so we'll just start up here at the top. Renaissance, Unit 2. This is one of the least questioned units on the SOL. Okay? Least questioned units. When you're studying, don't spend the bulk of your time right here. Glance through it, understand it, but don't spend an hour focused on it. Does that make sense? So the Renaissance is the rebirth of classical Greek and Roman knowledge. It begins in northern Italy and then spreads north to Britain. Before this, the culture and the few centuries in Europe were dominated by religion. Okay? Dominated by the church, dominated by religion. You had four people you had to know. Shakespeare, he was the author. Okay, he wrote sonnets, plays, essays, things like that. No Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Othello, basically the stuff you learn in English class. Gutenberg was the printing press. This enabled the ideas of the Renaissance to spread. Da Vinci was an artist. He painted the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. Michelangelo was also an artist, but he was a sculptor as well. He sculpted David, La Pieta, painted the Sistine Chapel. During the Renaissance, you have the birth of humanism. Okay? Humanism is a study of the humanities to improve society, such as literature, art, history, things like this. It moved away from being religious. This was promoted by Erasmus, and the purpose of it was to better people and focus more on education than religion. That's the Renaissance. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay, religions. You got 5 religions. You got to know them. Because these religions have to do with everything else going forward. They cause conflict. They fix conflicts. So you got Hinduism. It's many forms of one God. So it can be mono or polytheistic. When you die in Hinduism, you're reincarnated based on your karma. If you were a good person, you had good thoughts and actions, you reincarnate to the next level up. If you were a bad person, you committed bad actions or bad thoughts, you reincarnated down a level. Their social hierarchy was called the caste system. Technically illegal, still practiced. Judaism was the first monotheistic religion. Okay, first one to have one God and only one God, founded by Abraham. The set of laws is the 10 Commandments for moral and religious conduct. Their holy book is the Torah. Okay, they were found in modern day Israel. Israel is the only majority Jewish nation in the world. Buddhism was founded by Siddhartha Gautama. It was founded in India and then spread to the rest of Eastern and Southeast Asia through Ashoka and their missionaries. You reach enlightenment in Buddhism following the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. The basis of Christianity was Judaism. Okay, the founder of Christianity was Jesus. And the Christians add the New Testament to the Torah. Basically, the Torah is the Old Testament. Christians add the New Testament, it becomes the Holy Bible. trying to see if there's anything else important to add with that. Islam was founded by Muhammad the Prophet. The holy book is the Quran, or the Quran. You can see it spelled either way, Koran or Quran. The three holy cities in order are Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. You have the 5 pillars of Islam: creed, almsgiving, fasting, the Hajj, and prayer. Any questions on the religions? Okay. With the Reformation, okay, there are a lot of standards that have to go with the Reformation, and a lot of stuff that comes out of this unit. Okay, you got to know this. So the Reformation was criticism of the Catholic Church that led to its separation into new Christian religions. This is where you get Protestant versus Catholic. Okay, it's Christianity that's split up. Martin Luther starts the printing, or the Protestant Reformation, and he's aided by the printing press because they were able to print his ideas and spread it throughout Europe. The 2 early reformers are John Wycliffe, who translated the Bible to English and spoke out against the Pope, and John Huss, who spoke out against the Pope, and both of them were killed. Okay. The main reformers are Martin Luther, who criticized the Catholic Church through the 95 Theses. Basically, he focused on indulgences and usury. Remember, indulgences are the get-out-of-hell-free cards. You pay to have your sins forgiven. Usury is the high rate of interest. His main thought was salvation by faith alone. The Bible is the sole authority, not the Pope, not traditions, not priests. The Bible. As long as you understand the Bible and you have faith, you're saved. Okay? John Calvin, his main 2 things were work ethic and predestination. You were predestined to go to heaven or hell, and your work ethic showed your salvation. If you were a good, hard worker, it showed you were saved. You were predestined for heaven. If you were lazy, it showed you were predestined for hell. King Henry VIII became the head of the Anglican Church. He broke with Rome to get a divorce. He took Catholic money and land, set up his own church, made himself the leader of the church. Elizabeth took over the Anglican Church, the Church of England, and made it the official national church. She had tolerance to people who spoke out against her in the church. She also defeated the Spanish Armada in 1588. Any questions so far? I know I'm just powering through this, but we got 16 units to get through. The aftermath of the Reformation. In Germany, northern Germany was Protestant, southern Germany was Catholic. Southern Germany was led by the Holy Roman Empire, the Habsburg family. This led to a German Civil War, also known as the 30 Years' War. This war ended with the Treaty of Westphalia, where each German state decided whether they were Catholic or Protestant. In France, you had Huguenots, which were French Calvinists, French Protestants. They were granted freedom to worship through the Edict of Nantes. Cardinal Richelieu became the leader of France, and he led France during the 30 Years' War, changed the 30 Years' War from a religious to a political war. The Catholic Counter-Reformation, they set up 3 different things. Okay, the Council of Trent was where they called together priests and reaffirmed a lot of church doctrine. Basically, they all got together and said, you know what? We're doing pretty good. Let's keep it the way it was. They did outlaw indulgences, though, at the Council of Trent. The group that was founded to spread the Catholic doctrine worldwide was the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits. You can also see this as the works of St. Ignatius of Loyola. All the same thing. Catholics ensured that people were staying true to the doctrine through the Inquisition. If you spoke out, well, they arrested you, burned you at the stake, or just threw you in jail. So, don't you dare speak out against the Pope. Bad things happen. Good so far. Any questions so far? Are you good? Okay. Was this the same history you were in? World II or World War?
I think it was World War I.
Like prehistoric stuff?
I don't know, I have to look. I don't know.
You'll be okay. I hope you'll be okay. We'll make it work. You still awake back there?
Yeah.
You still awake?
Watching YouTube going on here.
Focus, kid. Come on. Okay, Age of Discovery, Unit 4. Got the 3 G's, gold, God, and glory. Okay. You had new ways to help navigate. You had the compass, which made it easy to sail at night, helped with direction. You had the astrolabe, which helped them read the stars, also helped with direction. And you had lateen sails, which helped them sail against the wind, helped the speed of these journeys. You had the triangle trade set up. So from the Americas to Europe, you had raw materials and cash crops. From Europe to Africa, you had manufactured goods such as guns and rum. And from Africa to the Americas, you had slaves along the Middle Passage. The Columbian Exchange was a transfer of items between the New World and the Old World. From the New World, or from the Old World to the New World, you have horses, cattle, and disease. From the Old World to the New World, you have tobacco, corn, and potatoes. We'll get to the explorers in a second. The impact of the Age of Discovery, you had the encomienda system forced on Native Americans in Latin America. Aztec and Inca died largely due to disease, mainly smallpox. In Africa, the Europeans wanted slaves and gold, and they set up trading posts on the exterior of Africa along the coast to prevent disease. So, let's talk explorers. Da Gama went from Portugal around the southern tip of Africa to India. Okay, remember Vasco da Gama? The V goes around Africa, and da Gama, or Vasco sounds like Tabasco. That's how you remember he got spices. Okay? Magellan went from Spain around the southern tip of South America and all the way back around the world. Okay, he was the first to circumnavigate. Remember, Magellan was killed in the Philippines, though, and they soaked his body in vinegar to get it back to Spain. Remember, Magellan turns into jello. Columbus goes from Spain. Remember, he was an Italian, but he sailed from Spain to the Caribbean, Hispaniola, areas like that. He made 4 trips. Francis Drake went from England around the world, first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe. Cortez, Spanish conquistador, went from Spain, conquered the Aztec in Mexico. Cartier, remember he's French, he goes to Canada because the Canadians like to say A. There you go. Pizarro was Spanish conquistador, went from Spain, conquered the Inca down here in Peru. The last one down here, Prince Henry, he was Portuguese. He didn't actually sail anywhere. He was, Prince Henry the Navigator set up a school for navigators, okay? He provided money for voyages to Africa. Questions here? Unit 5, you have the Ottoman Empire. Remember, this is global trade. The Ottoman Empire the Byzantine Empire fell in 1453 with the fall of Constantinople. The Ottoman Empire took over. The Ottomans renamed Constantinople to Istanbul. They unified that region with religion, with Islam. The Ottomans were religious tolerant at first. And they traded coffee and ceramics. Remember that a coffee mug is made of ceramics. You put coffee in it. That's how you remember what the Ottomans traded. The Mughals were in northern India. They were also a Muslim empire. They were descended from the Mongols. They built the Taj Mahal. The Mughals were known for textile spices. Remember that they set up the number system, a Hindu-Arabic numeral system. The first European nation to get to India was Portugal, but the British were the ones who ended up conquering there. As far as China goes, all you really need to know was that they set up enclaves, cities to where they could control European influence. Japan had a shogun in charge, the military leader. The emperor was powerless, and they set up isolation. Instead of putting the Europeans in a corner to prevent their influence, Japan put themselves in a corner and completely isolated from the rest of the world. Any questions? If I'm going too fast, or if you have a question, please stop me. All right. 14 dead white guys. And that got some people to look up. Okay. Copernicus set up the heliocentric theory. Okay, sun is the center of the universe. Helio is sun, centric means center. Copernicus, the sun is the center. Kepler had elliptical orbits. Okay, he built off of what Copernicus did. Said that the planets don't move in perfect circles, they move in more of an egg-shaped oval. Galileo proved what Copernicus and Kepler were saying using the telescope. Sir Isaac Newton was gravity. Remember the apple fell and hit him in the head? He discovered gravity. He also set up the laws of physics and the scientific method. Thomas Hobbes, sorry, I skipped one. William Harvey, circulatory system. Okay? Remember, Harvey, heartbeat. Or Hurricane Harvey, that moves in a circular motion. Harvey discovered the circulatory system. Thomas Hobbes wrote the Leviathan. He said that men exist in a state of nature. Therefore, you need a strong government to keep you from killing each other. John Locke wrote the 2 treatises on government. He said that all men have the unalienable right to life, liberty, natural rights, such as life, liberty, and property. Okay? So the L's go together. Locke, life, liberty. Montesquieu set up the 3 branches of government. Okay, separation of powers. Montesquieu. Remember, letter M touches the ground 3 times. Or you can treat it like you're 3 years old. Or sorry, not 3. Shoot, how old? 5. Kindergarten. They're starting to learn how to sound out words. Montesquieu. It's got 3 syllables, 3 branches of government. Separation of powers. Easy enough? Everybody still with me? Some of you look like you would rather be asleep. But, surprise, I would be too. But, alas, here we are. Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote the Social Contract. Okay, he was a main influence on the French Revolution. Said that the government gets its power from the people. The people give the government the power to rule, but the government has to protect them. Voltaire, religious tolerance, separation of church and state. Remember with the letter V, the church is on one side, the state's on the other. Johann Sebastian Bach wrote Baroque music. The B's go together. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was classical music. You got 2 composers. Bach is Baroque. Mozart is classical. Back in the 90s, rappers used to be called MCs. Okay? So as long as you know MC goes with music, Mozart is classical. MC. Good? Who am I missing? Delacroix, Eugene Delacroix, super French name. He started the Romantic School of Art. Remember that France is the city of love, the city of romance. Or not France, Paris. There we go. Paris, France. The city of romance. Delacroix is a super French name, Romantic School of Art. Miguel de Cervantes wrote the first novel. Okay? The first novel was Don Quixote. Basically, it was about this old crazy guy who decided he was going to fight a windmill. I'm serious. That's basically what Don Quixote is. He thought the windmill was a giant or something and decided he wanted to fight the windmill. Anyway,
He win.
I think so. Besides the point, Don Quixote is a super Spanish novel. Miguel de Cervantes is a super Spanish name. Okay, the Spanish goes together. Absolutism, you need to know two of the kings. King Louis XIV was the Sun King in France. He built the Palace of Versailles and centralized the power by keeping the nobles in Versailles. He ruled for 72 years. He's the one that said, "I am the state." Peter the Great, he went to Western Europe, liked what he saw, decided he was going to westernize Russia. Okay, westernize and modernize Russia. So he builds the Winter Palace, he cuts men's beards, he sets up a navy, he changes the calendar, he starts newspapers, he builds St. Petersburg, all trying to make Russia more like Western Europe. English Civil War was between Charles I and Oliver Cromwell, okay, between the king and parliament. Because of this, Charles I dies, he loses the war, then he dies. Once Cromwell dies, they bring back Charles II through what is known as the Restoration. These kings at the time believed in divine right, which means that they were given the right to rule by God. After Charles II lost the throne, Parliament went and got William of Orange from the Netherlands, brought in William and Mary during the Glorious Revolution. They signed the English Bill of Rights of 1689 to take power. Questions? Okay. During the French Revolution, the Enlightenment thinkers promoted more rights for people. So that's how they influenced the revolution. The Americans influenced the French Revolution because the French came and helped us win our freedom. Then they went back and wanted their own freedom. It began with the storming of the Bastille, where they were protesting government abuse and getting weapons. This led to the Reign of Terror. Okay, the Reign of Terror was symbolized by guillotines. Okay, remember they killed over 500,000 people by chopping their heads off with giant blades. It's a good time. So one of the people to get their head chopped off is Louis XVI, the king. So power goes from a monarchy, from Louis, to the Committee of Public Safety, led by Robespierre. Then he gets his head chopped off, and Napoleon takes over and turns France into an empire. Napoleon tries to unify Europe under one ruler. He is unsuccessful. His main contribution to European law was the Napoleonic Code, which was the codification of the law. And he also ended up promoting nationalism by accident, because all these countries he conquered hated him so much that they said, well, we're Germany. We don't need a Frenchman winning. Or we're Italy. We don't need a French guy in charge. I started promoting this feeling of nationalism, or this pride in one's country. Napoleon leads to the Congress of Vienna. And the main thing here is the balance of power doctrine. No one country is more powerful than the others. They also wanted to restore monarchies and redraw the map of Europe, which they were successful with in both. The people of Europe were not happy about this, so they had the revolution to 1848. This doesn't work. A lot of people are killed. The revolutions are unsuccessful. You had two new political philosophies coming out of the Congress of Vienna: liberalism and conservatism. Liberalism wanted change, democracy, people having the right to vote, people having the rights in general. Conservatism wanted things to stay the same. They wanted monarchies, a strong, organized church, and obedience to political authority. Questions?
So why did King and all them get their heads chopped off? What was the purpose?
To overthrow. And then it ended up turning into an empire anyway. So it kind of backfired. Okay, Germany. Guys. Germany. Unified by Otto von Bismarck, he was a Prussian. Okay? He used militarism and nationalism to unify this, and he had a real politic. Remember, this is any means to achieve and hold power. Think of his blood and iron speech. The problems of today will not be solved by speeches and majority decisions, but through blood and iron. He's not going to talk his way out of a problem. He's going to fight his way through the problem. In Italy, it was led by Count Cavour and Giuseppe Garibaldi. Count Cavour led the kingdom of Sardinia and unified northern Italy. Giuseppe Garibaldi led the Red Shirts and unified southern Italy to join it to northern Italy. The last part of Italy to join unified Italy was the Papal States, or Rome. Okay? Latin America, you have four main castes, or a very rigid social structure. The top were the viceroys of the Peninsulares. They were born in Spain, their parents were Spanish, and they had the most power. Creoles were born in Latin America, their parents were Spanish, they had the second most. Mestizos were born in Latin America, one parent was native, one parent was Spanish. And then mulattoes were born in Latin America, one parent was African, the other parent was either native or Spanish, and they had the least amount of power. The colonial system in 19th century Latin America, remember, they based their governments on the home country, so they were based on Spain. Their religion was Catholic. The main thing they were looking for in these colonies was gold. They wanted money. Havana, Mexico City, Lima, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, all of those are colonial outposts. Remember, Sao Paulo was Brazil, so that was a Portuguese outpost. Those other ones are all Spanish. Good? Phew, I'm starting to get lightheaded. Trying to get through this so quickly. In Mexico, the revolution was led by Father Miguel Hidalgo. In northern Latin America, it was led by Simón Bolívar. Remember, he was the liberator. Remember, Bolivia is named after him. Haiti was led by Toussaint Louverture. This is a slave revolt. The only successful slave revolt in all of history. Remember, Haiti was a French colony. The Industrial Revolution began in England and then spread to Western Europe and the United States. It began in England due to an abundance of coal and iron. You had the British Enclosure Act, where private investors could fence off public land and kick the peasants off of it. The cottage industry was family-based and everything was made in the home. This gets phased out for the factory system, where things are made in centrally located buildings, very harsh conditions, with women and children competing with men for jobs and wages. Sorry, should have went here first, but anyway. Once the Spanish leave Latin America, they don't come back due to the Monroe Doctrine, but mainly because Europe decided to start imperializing Africa and Asia instead. Latin America is one of the newer units, but pay attention to it. Questions so far? Good. The inventors for the Industrial Revolution. James Hargreaves sets up the spinning jenny. Remember, Hargreaves creates something that weaves. James Whii is the steam engine. Eli Whitney sets up the cotton gin. Edward Jenner is smallpox. Remember, the Kardashians, the Jenners, either they're a disease or they're the cure, depending whether you hate them or not. Henry Bessemer sets up the process of making steel. This is called the Bessemer process. And Louis Pasteur had bacteria. He discovered the germ theory in bacteria. That's why your milk jug in your fridge right now still says pasteurized. He's the one that developed that process. The cotton gin leads to more slavery due to the increased amount of cotton they can separate. This leads to the U.S. Civil War and slavery being outlawed. In the Industrial Revolution, education, transportation, the middle class, population, standard of living, and urbanization all increase. But remember, the factories are dirty and dangerous. Children are cheaper and fit in small spaces, so they're hired, and the factory owner more than likely controls everything a family does. They probably have the mother, father, and all the children working for them. The social effects of the Industrial Revolution include new laws to regulate how long a child can work, so child labor laws. Women get the right to vote, or suffrage. And you have the increase of education because children are now required to go to school. The workers decide to strike back. They form labor unions for workers' rights. They use strikes, which is refusing to allow work to happen until needs are met. They also use collective bargaining, which is where the unions meet with the bosses to discuss wages, conditions, things like that. And lobbying, where they would go to elected officials to get change made. Capitalism, free market capitalism is no government control of the economy. This is also known as laissez-faire capitalism. The main thinker of capitalism is Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. Okay, he wrote The Wealth of Nations. Communism is socialism on steroids. With communism, you want to equally distribute the wealth. The key thinkers here are Karl Marx. He wrote Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto. He wrote the Communist Manifesto with Friedrich Engels, who was also one of the main thinkers in capitalism and socialism. Questions? Okay, continuing on. Imperialism would have been possible without the Industrial Revolution. Okay, they needed materials and markets due to the Industrial Revolution, due to needing raw materials and somewhere to sell this stuff. So there were three forms of imperialism. You had the colony, which is the mother country takes over completely. A protectorate, where the government's run by the weaker country, but the mother country protects them. And the spheres of influence, which are economic and trade partnerships, such as enclaves. Okay? Virginia was a colony. The Gold Coast was a protectorate. And like China, Chinatowns can be seen as enclaves because they're ethnic enclaves. That's just how it is. Europe ends up dominating Asia and Africa. China had spheres of influence. The Suez Canal made trade to India easily, connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, controlled by the British. India was dominated by the British East India Company, and the Indian National Congress was formed there to promote Indian independence. Commodore Matthew Perry forced Japan to open trade with the United States through the Treaty of Kanagawa. The Boxer Rebellion was where Chinese nationalists tried to take China back from foreign influences, ends up backfiring completely. World War I, you had the main causes: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Gavrilo Princip, who was a member of the Serbian Black Hand, kills Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary on June 28, 1914. This assassination started World War I. The three main aspects of World War I you need to know is unrestricted submarine warfare. The Germans were sinking merchant boats. The Zimmermann Telegram was where the Germans proposed an alliance with Mexico against the United States. It was intercepted by the British. And the Lusitania was a British passenger ship sunk in 1915. It was going from the United States to England. Those three things lead to the United States entering World War I in 1917. Russia leads to war after the Russian Revolution, where the Bolsheviks overthrew the government. The communists took over the government. They were led by Vladimir Lenin. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was the treaty with Germany that took Russia out of the war. Remember that the leaders here, you had Woodrow Wilson for the United States, Tsar Nicholas II for Russia, Wilhelm II for Germany, and then the Austrian Archduke and Gavrilo Princip. Woodrow Wilson was the President of the United States. He created the 14 points. Kaiser Wilhelm was the German leader who gave Austria-Hungary a blank check. The Treaty of Versailles ended World War I. Colonies wanted independence, but they did not get it. The Russian, Ottoman, German, and Austro-Hungarian empires all ended after World War I. The League of Nations was formed, set up the mandate system, which gave Britain and France control of the former Ottoman Empire. According to the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was at fault for World War I. They had to pay reparations. They had to give up their military, give up territory. Wilson's 14th point was the creation of the League of Nations. It's the only one that got put into the treaty. By 1917, Tsar Nicholas II had lost the Russo-Japanese War in 1905. He was incompetent, so he didn't know what he was doing, and suffered severe losses during World War I. So due to this, the Bolsheviks rose up, led by Vladimir Lenin, and overthrew the government and killed the Tsar and his entire family. Vladimir Lenin set up the new economic plan. It introduced small-scale capitalism to move Russia away from wartime communism. During the interwar period, the League of Nations tried to prevent future wars, but the United States was not a member. Because the U.S. was not a member, it had no ability to enforce decisions. Okay? The mandate system, Britain and France controlled the former Ottoman Empire. Britain gained control of Palestine, Transjordan and Iraq. France had Syria and Lebanon. Questions there? World War I, the interwar period, World War II, and the Cold War, that's where the bulk of the SOL is going to be. Okay? The Great Depression, it was aided by the Treaty of Versailles because Germany had to pay reparations. They had severe inflation because they printed more money to pay their reparations. Remember, the Americans dominated the world economy, so when the American economy crashed, the rest of the world crashed as well. Credit was an issue. They issued too much credit. Because they issued too much credit, and when the economy crashed, people couldn't repay the banks, so the banks had to close. All this occurred after the stock market crash in October of 1929. Tariffs slowed and stopped global trade. And then the Depression led to the rise of dictators. In the Soviet Union, you had Stalin. Stalin promoted communism. He set up 5-year plans to industrialize the Soviet Union. He took land away from peasants and through collectivization. And he got rid of all of his enemies through the Great Purge. Anyone he deemed a threat, he either had killed or arrested. Hitler takes power in Germany, sets up Nazi Germany. He promoted anti-Semitism, which is a hatred of the Jews. He was after land, which is create a new German empire. He set up the National Socialist Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party. He also killed anybody who spoke out against him. In Italy, you have Mussolini. He was the first fascist leader. He wanted to restore the glory of the Roman Empire. In order to do this, he invades Ethiopia. In Japan, you have Hideki Tojo, who was the military leader, the shogun, and Hirohito, who was the emperor. They promoted militarism. They started invading nearby countries, Korea, Manchuria, China, for land and raw materials. World War I is caused by these totalitarian dictators through their aggressive, imperialistic, militaristic issues. The Treaty of Versailles caused issues because it blamed Germany and gave no power to the League of Nations, so the League of Nations could not stop these dictators. So the League of Nations was too weak. The United States stayed isolated. We were still trying to recover from the Great Depression. appeasement was the final straw where Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, went to Munich, met with Hitler, said, here, take Czechoslovakia, take this little part of it, and then you have to stop. And Hitler said, okay. Chamberlain went back to England. I've gotten peace in our time. Congratulations. Go me. And then Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia. Did not work. It backfired horribly. World War II is the second most questioned unit, so you got to understand World War II. So, timeline of the war. Germany invades Poland in 1939. France falls in 1940, and then Germany attacks Britain. This is the Battle of Britain, or the Blitz. Okay? Britain wins, so then Germany breaks their treaty and invades the Soviet Union. Breaks the non-aggression pact. End of 1941, December 7th, Pearl Harbor is attacked by Japan. Okay, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. The United States declares war on Japan. Skipping ahead to June 6, 1944, the Allies land in Europe. This is D-Day. This is the invasion of Normandy. It's the Battle of Normandy. If you see D-Day or Normandy, this is what they're talking about. Then August 1945, the U.S. brings the war to the close using the atomic bombs on Japan. So the world leaders you need to know. FDR is the American president for most of the war. He dies in early 1945. Harry Truman takes over. Harry Truman is the one who decides to drop the bombs on Japan. He's the U.S. president at the end of World War II. Dwight D. Eisenhower is the supreme Allied commander in Europe. He was the commander of D-Day, American general. MacArthur was an American general. He was the commander in the Pacific. George C. Marshall was American. He wrote the Marshall Plan, the plan to get Europe recovered after the war. Winston Churchill was the British Prime Minister. Joseph Stalin was the Soviet leader. Hitler was the Nazi leader. Hirohito was the Emperor of Japan. Hideki Tojo was the military leader of Japan. The outcomes of the war. You have the United States and the Soviet Union emerging as the two superpowers. The Nazi leaders who were captured had to face trial at Nuremberg. The divide between Eastern and Western Europe was called the Iron Curtain. This was put in place by a speech from Winston Churchill in 1946. The United Nations replaces the League of Nations. The Marshall Plan gives more money to Europe, helps Europe rebuild. The two alliances come to symbolize the Cold War. The Warsaw Pact, which is led by the Soviet Union, created in 1955, and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, that was created by the United States and 10 Western European nations in 1949. Berlin and Germany are both split, east and west. The west is controlled by U.S., Britain, and France. The east is controlled by the Soviet Union. General MacArthur in the United States helps Japan restructure their economy and help them after World War II. South Korea, Japan, and West Germany all become capitalist, free market, democratic societies. You have multiple genocides. You got to know the Holocaust was fueled by anti-Semitism, which is the hatred of the Jews. This was caused by the Germans, the Nazis. The final solution was to kill all the Jews. They killed 6 million people. Other genocides you need to know. The 1910s, Armenia, Christians, the Armenians are killed by the Ottomans. 1940s Europe is the Jews by the Nazis. The Soviet Union is enemies of Stalin. 1970s Cambodia is enemies of Pol Pot, killed by Khmer Rouge. 1990s Rwanda is the Tutsis killed by the Hutus. 1990s Yugoslavia, this is the Bosnian genocide. You have Muslims and other ethnic groups killed by Christians. Okay? The Cold War is the most questioned unit. Okay? You got to know the Cold War. It was the unofficial beginning was the Yalta Conference during the final days of World War II. The Iron Curtain was not a real wall. It was a metaphorical divide between East and West Europe, between communism and democracy. The Soviet Union refused Marshall Plan money from the United States. The Americans were a capitalist, democratic society. The Soviets were a dictatorship and communist. This is the policy of containment. over here, okay, are also known as the Truman Doctrine. The plan here was to prevent communism from spreading. You weren't going to end it where it was, but you didn't want it to spread. And this was also part of the domino theory. Cold War leaders. Harry Truman was the American president. Chiang Kai-shek was the nationalist leader of China. They lost the Chinese Civil War. Mao Zedong was the communist leader of China. He won the Chinese Civil War. Ho Chi Minh was the leader of the Viet Cong in North Vietnam. And Indira Gandhi was the Indian prime minister who promoted a nuclear program in India with the help of the Soviet Union. Margaret Thatcher was the Iron Lady, the British prime minister, promoted a closer relationship with the United States, and asserted the military power at the Falkland Islands. Mikhail Gorbachev was the last Soviet leader. He had the policy of the glasnost and perestroika. Deng Xiaoping was the Chinese leader, kept a communist government, but made more of a free market economy. He was also the leader over the Tiananmen Square massacre, where the Chinese government killed a bunch of protesters. I mean, thousands of people, because they were protesting for freedom. The two alliances you need to know: the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was led by the United States, Warsaw Pact led by the Soviet Union. Down here, Berlin is split east and west, and West Berlin is surrounded by the Berlin Wall. You have nuclear weapons, and the theory of deterrence basically says that because both countries have the ability to destroy the world, no country is going to use a nuclear weapon. Major events: you got the Chinese Civil War, nationalists versus communists. Nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek, communists led by Mao Zedong. The communists end up winning, and mainland China today is communist, and the nationalists fled to the island of Taiwan. The Korean War: North Korea, which is communist, invaded South Korea, which is anti-communist. The boundary before the conflict was 38th parallel. Boundary today is still the 38th parallel. It ends in a stalemate in the armistice in 1953. The Berlin Wall was torn down in 1989, and it symbolizes the end of the Cold War and the end of communism. You have the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, between President John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev. U.S. almost went to nuclear war with the Soviets. We ended up not, though. There was a hotline installed. The U.S. removed missiles from Turkey. Soviets removed missiles from Cuba. In Vietnam, they were controlled by the French. They got independence from the French. It was divided north and south. North Vietnam was led by Ho Chi Minh. The U.S. got into the conflict due to the domino theory and the policy of containment. And then we left the conflict in 1973, 1975. Saigon falls to North Vietnam. Today, Vietnam is united and communist. In the Soviet Union, glasnost is openness, perestroika is restructuring. Gorbachev was the last president of the Soviet Union. In Africa, you have peaceful and nonviolent revolutions. Algeria fought a war for independence with France. Kenya was led by Jomo Kenyatta against the British. In Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah got independence there peacefully. Nkrumah is probably not going to be on the test, but just in case. South Africa, you have apartheid, which is the separation of the races and discrimination against non-white South Africans. After 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela, the leader of the African National Congress, is released by President F.W. de Klerk, and he becomes the first black president of South Africa in 1994. In Israel, you have Golda Meir. She led Israel during the Yom Kippur War and sought aid of the United States. In Egypt, you have the Gamal Abdel Nasser. He nationalized the Suez Canal and built the Aswan High Dam. In India, 1848, the British take over. 1885, you have the Indian National Congress formed to oppose the British. Then you have the independence movement led by Gandhi, Mohandas Gandhi, and today India is the world's largest independent democracy. Jawaharlal Nehru was the first president, and the issues in India are tense between Pakistan and India due to Hindu-Muslim issues, as well as the region of Kashmir. Today, you have a few main things. You have terrorism. Okay? The 1972 Munich Olympics were attacked due to the Muslim-Jewish conflict. Israel being created out of Palestine. 9/11 was caused by Al-Qaeda, which was led by Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden was killed by U.S. Navy SEALs on May 1st, 2011. You have the conflict in Northern Ireland between Protestants and Catholics. The main terrorist activities are the United States, Europe, and the Middle East. The world's responded to terrorism through surveillance and security, increased at ports and airports, and more ID badges and photos. Economic interdependence. You have multinational corporations like these above. You have regional integration, such as the Economic Union in Europe, the European Union, which is common currency and free trade. If the World Trade Organization would set standards to provide equal access, this is a trade agreement. NAFTA is a free trade agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, replaced by USMCA in 2020. The International Monetary Fund stabilizes currencies and exchange rates and provides loans. The United Nations establishes peace and improves the lives of member countries. The environmental and social challenges facing the planet today are pollution, climate change, famine, terrorism, poverty, population growth, migration, guest workers' disease, etc. Any questions? I know that was a lot. Okay? Trust me, I know that was a lot. I have no idea how that Miss DeLong lady goes through all that in 15 minutes. I mean, that was about 55 minutes or so. And I'm about to pass out. I'm extremely lightheaded right now.
Need some coffee.
So, you guys got a half hour. Get caught up on work, study. I'm going to play that Miss DeLong video. You guys, if you have any questions, leave a comment, shoot me an email, whatever. And I will help you out. In person, you'll take the SOL Friday morning. Virtual, you're taking it Friday afternoon. I'm not exactly sure what the plan is or how, but
So for the SOL,
there's the times.
If you're virtual, how, what can you
So,
do?
if you have any questions, let me know.